Hello, everyone. Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And it's January 2024. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
We are excited about our Book of the Month pick this month, which is The Sins We Hide by Scarlett Cole, writing as S. Cole. And I read this book actually this time last year and was obsessed and like went straight into book two. Um, and so when we were thinking about books for this year, I was like, this needs to be one of them. More people need to know about this series. It's great.
Yeah, I have been collecting. I feel like all of last year, I've been
Yep.
like I've been like a little dragon collecting books to binge. So I think Scarlett just released book five, and it seemed like a good time to like begin.
Yeah, definitely. The covers are amazing. Like it's so immersive, like it's so propulsive. It's really great.
hmm
So, and this is a dual POV, which I always enjoy. So we start with our hero Clutch, aka Landon, who is acting as pallbearer at the funeral of their former president, who helped raise him when his dad went to prison when he was a young teenager.
This is a motorcycle club, so all of the kind of brotherhood and yet lawlessness that comes with it, and
Right.
they're very close.
Hmm.
Um, the club people, and so
Yeah.
but
Well, the
he is
club itself is
especially close
close
with the
and
family
yeah,
because he kind of grew up with the president of the motorcycle club and his son.
right. So his nickname is Clutch because he's always come through in the clutch, which is what you would expect. Arthur, who was the former president, died in a car accident a week before. The new president is Arthur's son and Clutch's best
Uther.
friend, Uther, who is also known as King. And Clutch is now the VP, and that's been for 3 generations. Their grandfathers started the club together and were president and VP, and then their dads, and now them. So then they go back to the clubhouse to kind of have their wake or whatever afterward. Of course, there's club girls all around and all
I'm
that.
like, their wake
Um,
is
it's
real.
wild, yeah. It's wild, and there's gonna be like fights. Like he said, Clutch is fighting that night or whatever. Um,
That's how they're gonna get the grief out of the system, I guess. But there's also
Grief
this lady,
and
Suze, who's
yeah,
like, I'll help you out. And he's just like,
maybe
wait for
later.
later.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like you very quickly are like, oh, this world is a whole thing.
right, exactly. And then right when you're getting all that, we switch to Gwen. It's been 15 years since she was last in the clubhouse when she left at age 13, and she's been in witness protection. She buried her mom this morning after someone found them in Ohio, where they'd been this whole time, and then drove straight here afterward to New Jersey, which is where they are. And so her twin brother, Uther, spots her across the room, and she tells him she needs to see dad. And then she realizes he's wearing the president patch, and she
Well,
tells
he like kind
him,
of points it out. And
yeah,
it's an interesting dynamic because you're kind of like at first you're like, oh, what is she doing in this place? And then it's like, oh, she's kind of scared to be there,
mhm,
but she is like, well, this
she
is the
needs to be
only
there.
place I
Yeah.
need to be. And so when she asks for the dad and she finds out the dad died, she's like,
Well, and
oh
at
shoot.
first she says, I need to see dad. And he says, why? He doesn't tell her right away that he's dead.
Yeah.
And so and she says, she's like, I need to talk to the puppet master, not the puppet, or something like that, like basically. And
She
he's
says
like,
the organ grinder, not the
oh,
monkey, is what
right.
she
Yeah,
says.
that's
And I'm
right.
like, oh.
And he's like, you're looking at the grinder, and he points out the patch. And so she realizes things are not as they used to be. And she tells him that their mom
Well,
is
and she's
dead.
kind of like, where is he? Because she thinks he's like retired or something. So it
Right.
takes a minute
Yeah.
for like all the pieces to fall into place. But once
Yeah.
they do, she's like, oh, well, we definitely need to talk then
Right. So
because
she's like, mom's dead. She got shot and I got shot too. I buried her this morning. And he's like, okay, let's go to my office. And so they go in his office. He asks where she's been. She asks what happened to dad. And then Landon comes in.
he calls for his VP.
Yes, he calls for his
And,
VP, who comes busting in, complaining that he was mid-sex and like, what the hell, man, basically.
and then he
And she's like,
sees
great, that's what I want to know about this boy that I loved when I was a teenager. And there's a line that says she missed him more than her brother. And I was like, oh no.
Her brother, who is her twin.
Yeah, who is her
Yeah,
twin. And
yeah.
so she decides to use clutch, like to keep distance. Like she sees it on his
But
vest and she's
she
like,
said
okay, I'm
she's
gonna
not
use
gonna
that.
call him by his name. She's
Yeah.
gonna call him Clutch.
And so Gwen's mom would never talk about why they left. But she's of course missed her twin most of her life. Um, Clutch and everybody else thinks her mom was responsible for this botched sale that ended in some dead men in their club and a dead Irishman from the mob, which was a whole other mess. And his dad ended up in prison for life. That's when that all happened
Clutch's
the
dad
same
did,
night.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, but so basically, there was a job that they were doing that, there was a job they were doing, and it got, like, someone leaked information,
Mhm.
and so people got arrested, people died, um, and
And people went,
the
yeah,
whole,
and, like, his dad's in prison for life, and I think 2 other guys too,
because
and then a couple
they
other guys
shot,
got
like,
killed.
were, like, shooting at the police officers,
Right.
like, it was a whole
Yeah,
thing, and they were trying to figure out what happened, and then they realized that Gwen and her mom were gone, and they were
right.
like, "Oh, she
She's
leaked
the
the
one. Yep.
information." Um,
And it's interesting because at this point, he thinks about how heartbroken he was when he was 13 about never seeing her again, and how settled he feels at seeing her again, and it pisses him off because he doesn't want her to be, like, the cure for what's ailed him all this time, basically, but clearly she's gonna be. Um, and so Gwen says she has no idea what her mom did or what happened that night. It's why she's there. Now that her mom's dead, she's trying to figure things out.
yeah,
And
and she is
also
kind of
she
like, "I was 13.
right.
All I knew was that dad tucked us in the car and told us to drive, and that he put money in the trunk, and that's all I knew." And they
Yeah.
were like,
Dad knew you left? Like,
"Excuse me?"
yeah. So that's a whole can of worms she's opening. Plus
But it's interesting because she doesn't. It's like she. So they both sides seem very, like, clear on what happened, and then when they start talking, everyone's like,
wait a minute.
"We're not, like, what
Yeah.
we think happened is not what you think happened." It's
Yeah.
very it was so
Very
well done
interesting.
because as I was reading it, I was like, "Oh crap."
Yeah. Yeah, and she doesn't even know, like, she just says what happened. Like, she doesn't know that that's not what they already know. And so now that both parents are dead, she's assuming dad's accident wasn't an accident either, and that they need to figure out what the hell's going on.
Yeah,
Um,
and she starts saying, like, is this a hit or whatever?" And they're like,
you're
"You little
using
girl
some
are
words you
using
don't
words that
understand.
you don't
Yeah.
even know what they mean." And it's so interesting because she walks in and she's like, "Ew, this place is kind of gross."
Oh,
And they
yeah.
see her and they're like, that they're both so, like, at odds
Yeah.
and, like, disdainful of each other, that it's
Mhm,
a really interesting dynamic for people who, like, love each other but
mhm.
haven't seen each other in a long time and are now, like, colliding in a way where they're like, "Oh, we don't fit."
Yeah. So they obviously need to investigate this accident more, figure out who's behind it, and they're going to keep Gwen there for now, while they kind of check out the story and everything. And so, Clutch is on guard duty. So she has to stay in her dad's room, which is like hasn't been cleaned. Nobody's in there since he died. Been in there since he died. It's been like a week. Um, she tries to convince Clutch to let her go, but of course he's not going to. When
They
she's
are
in,
doing a little dance a little bit because
mhm,
she's trying to see how far she can push him, and
mhm,
he's trying real hard to, like, not let her see that he, like, immediately has a soft spot for her.
yep,
I think before we started, I was saying he's like he's a soft boy at heart.
for her.
But being very, like, he is making sure that his, like, persona as Clutch remains intact, and so it's real interesting. He does
It
dump
is.
her in that room, and it's gross in there, and
Yeah,
he
and
feels a little like,
well, she's a little bit skeeved out, but also she knows that, like, she needs to figure out what's going on, and so she searches the room. She finds an old family photo, which she pockets, and a small knife that she also pockets. Meanwhile, Clutch goes to talk to their tech guru and to King, and he suggests getting some cleaning stuff and letting Gwen, like, earn her keep, basically, like cleaning up the room, which nobody wanted to do because, everybody was all up in their feelings still about him just having died.
The thing that's interesting is that King is clear. He's like, it's not because you're like nostalgic, is it? And
Right.
he's just like, hell no. And I'm like, mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But clearly, it's like there's a couple people in here who have an idea of what might be happening.
Yeah.
Um, Clutch is just very like, this is all very practical on my part.
Oh,
I'm
yeah, because
just
he's like, "Oh,
saying.
if worst case scenario, the room is clean, when she's gone, and, best case scenario, like, you've gotten her in a better position and she's not gonna be so pissy at you." And so when he goes back to the room to talk to her about that, he realizes, like, how gross it actually is and how exhausted she is, and so
Also, yeah, he brought her like water or something, and she almost fell over. Like when she stood up, she
yeah.
was like,
Well,
whoop,
he brought
and
her coffee, and then she was talking about how exhausted she was, and he's like, "Wait, don't drink that." And then he brings her water instead because he's like, "You clearly need to go to sleep." And the room is disgusting, so he takes her to his room, which is clean, to get some sleep. And so she asks for some stuff from her car, and, he says he'll have somebody bring it up. And of course, he's feeling some kind of way about her being in his bed. But King made it clear that she was off limits to everyone in the club, which includes him. Um,
sure thing.
yeah. So they get a lead on the truck that hit Dad.
Oh, we should say there is this one guy who was like, I don't know,
Right,
that,
like, might be worth
like,
it.
which makes Clutch real mad, but also Clutch is like,
Same.
probably. He said, with my luck, it probably is. And
Yeah.
I was like, hmm.
And so they get a lead on the truck that hit their dad and it was stolen. Which of course the police hadn't even told them any of that yet. Like they just made it seem like an accident and they're like
It
clearly not
said it
really
was like the
investigating it.
glare from the light on the motorcycle must have like blinded but even though the truck like went into oncoming traffic
Hmm.
to hit him, but apparently they thought it was just like, oh no, it was
Right,
just.
like an accident. Yeah. So there was one witness to the accident named Iris O'Connor, who's a teacher. And so they're gonna send Spark to go talk to her because he's so pretty. So Clutch gets Gwen's stuff from the car and brings it up. And after noting like what a absolute piece of crap her car is, like he's like mad that she basically drove across half the country in this like beater. Um
Like there's duct tape holding the
the
bumper
bumper.
on, and also like I guess when he gets in the car, there's like rust that has like
Mm,
rusted through the whole bottom. I
yeah,
will say, as someone who grew up in the wilds of Canada, that like when you salt the roads, like
yeah.
cars get real rusty. But if the hole is going through the bottom of the car, like
Time to be done.
probably you need to do something about that. So
Um,
he's like, he earlier, he's very like, oh, she's too rich for my blood, and she's obviously like a princess. And then he gets the card, and it's
Not
like,
even. Yeah. So in his room, he hears her saying his name in her sleep, and he's like, "Fuck it." So he decides he's sleeping in the bed with her. So he gets undressed, and but he takes a shower first because obviously he was having sex with someone else earlier. Also, he's like written knuckles are bloody from the fight he was
he
in,
doesn't
and
even
all
think
this
about
stuff.
the fact that he was having sex with someone earlier. He's
Mhm.
like, she's so clean and sweet in there, and I'm kind of sticky and smelly, and my hands still have
My
blood
hands
on
are
them from
bloody.
this
Yep.
fight, and I am like,
Wait.
also,
Also, you were having sex, you degenerate. Yeah. So Gwen wakes up alone, but there's like an
he
indentation on the
does
pillow
he
next to
does
her.
give like fate a chance.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I'm gonna shower, and if she's still asleep when I come out, but if
Then I'm
she's
getting into bed.
awake, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
It's
Landon.
very funny. So she wakes up alone, but there's like an indentation in the pillow next to her, and she's like,
Also, she's
"Hmm."
warm in a suspicious way.
Yeah. So he comes in shortly after and to take her downstairs to get some food. And so she's about to make breakfast when Suze, the woman that he was with the night before, comes in and asks why he didn't come find her last night. And she's like, he clocks that she knows that means he didn't go sleep with her. And
Mhm.
she's like, oh, that was from his head in the pillow. Like he literally slept in the bed with me. And so
Yeah, originally she was thinking that like she was tired, and maybe she's just like her brain is.
right.
And
But
he
she
looks
dreamed
all
about being
rested and
held the
stuff,
night
so
before.
she's like, clearly, I mean,
Yeah.
anyway, it was sad because she was sad about it and was kind of kicking herself for feeling any which way.
Mhm.
But then that girl comes in. She said something about her having like bionic boobs and like she was not wearing very much
Not
clothes
wearing
and
very
she was
much,
like
yeah.
it's like defying gravity, like hanging
Yeah.
on to her. Um
And so he asks Suze to make them breakfast, which does
yeah,
not go over well with her. And then King walks in and asks Gwen about like her job, what she was doing. She was a manager of the maids of a hotel where she lived in Ohio.
yeah.
Um, and then the guys have to go to church to have their little meeting about everything that's going on, and she has to go back to the room. And so,
And no, I guess we should say she's locked in.
yeah.
Like originally when she came and they had a kind of an argument, or like the way that they welcomed her was very like, we don't want you here. So she was like, fine, I'm leaving.
Hmm.
And they said they stopped her from leaving. Like they've had
Yeah.
their security perimeter people be like, don't let her out.
Hmm.
And every place she's been so far, she's either like escorted or she's locked in.
Yeah. So she has to go back to her room. So at church, King lays out the details for everybody, and everybody agrees that he needs to lie low because someone's probably going to be after him too if they've tried to kill or if they've killed slash tried to kill the rest of his family.
King does not agree with this.
No, he doesn't like it, but after enough people agree, he's like, ugh, fine. So Gwen starts digging through the box of her mom's papers that she had brought. And she finds a letter from her dad, which is only 6 years old. So that's like much more recent than she thought her mom had contact with her dad. And it's basically was saying like he really loves her and misses her. He's sorry how everything went down, but he's
He's
grateful for
like,
what
I
she
know
did.
it's my fault for a certain thing. Like, well, he could not be faithful,
Yeah,
and he was like, I know that
was the
messed a
breaking
lot of
point.
stuff up for us. And he
Yep.
says, like, I really appreciate the sacrifice you made for the club, and
Yep.
like all things that you're like, wait a minute, this does not jive with the story that we have been told so far.
Yeah. And she decides not to tell the guys about it, at least not yet. She doesn't trust them. She doesn't know what they're going to do with the information, and she decides to keep it to herself for now.
And she doesn't really know what the information means. She just knows
Right.
that it's not the information she thought she knew.
Right. So Clutch walks in with food for her and says he has to go out, and she's dismissive, like, okay, run along. And he is like not having it. So he like corners her and like kisses the shit out of her, and then he leaves. And so Clutch and another brother, Halo, go to talk to this woman at the trucking company, and she gives them footage of the truck being stolen, which she had originally copied like for the police, but then they never came to get it. So she gives it to them. The video is super grainy when they get back and look at it, and they need more info. So Clutch has to go back and kind of like sweet talk this girl
The
into
only
like
thing that
giving
they
him more.
saw from that footage was that clearly whoever got in that car had a key. Like they did not have to struggle or do anything weird to get in.
Right.
And so they are like,
We
we
need to
need
know
more
about the employees.
information.
Yeah.
And since that lady was kind of flirty with Clutch, they were like,
Right.
the best way is for you to go
For you to go
and
back
be
and sweet talk her out of it, using whatever means necessary, basically. So, but at this point, King is ready to like let Gwen out of her room. Like they know she wasn't involved in this, like at this point, and
I
she
guess
can
we should
be
say
free.
that their like cyber person
Right.
has checked her phone, her car. They have also like when she showered or whatever and changed, Clutch like kind of checked her clothes and there wasn't any kind of
No
wire that
bugs
they could
or
see.
GPS
So
or
they're
anything. Yeah.
fairly certain that she's not really involved in anything and she just wants to figure out what's going on because
Yeah.
she doesn't feel safe anymore. She's like, she was in witness protection, which she didn't I don't think she realized it at first when they ran away that that was why they changed their names and
Right.
everything. But
She was still a
clearly she
kid.
knows
Yeah.
now. And but she's like, well, if they found me, like, we're not safe.
Right. Like I don't have to be this other person anymore because that didn't keep me safe anyway. So now I can be myself, but I got to figure out what happened. So King comes to let her out and they go outside to talk. He says that he confirmed everything with her story and that she was right to come there. And also that she's free to leave now, but that she shouldn't leave because they're both clearly in danger and they don't know from who, and it's not safe for her to be alone. Plus, he really wants to know her again. They're twins. Like that bond is strong, even when they've been apart for half their life. And and she
There's been
agrees
a
to
couple
stay.
moments before where he like as hard and mean as he is, there's been like moments where you're like, huh.
Yeah. And so she agrees to stay until at least until they get all this stuff figured out. And so after King walks away, Suze and Skylar, who is Uther's current like favorite flavor of the month, start talking shit to her, and she just gives it right back. Seemingly unconcerned, though confrontation does like make her, tense
Yeah.
up. So Clutch returns
But
with a
those
list.
two girls, it's like Skylar apparently is acting like she's like top dog, even though she actually is not like even
She's screwing the
officially
president, but
dating.
she's not his old lady. They're not dating. Like, there's nothing like that. Yeah.
So, but she's, it's, I feel like there's like those two girls are trying to like make their way to the top of some pecking order that like doesn't, and the men of the club or the, Clutch and King have had a
Right.
conversation about like how they need to like bring them down a notch because they are causing problems.
They're getting above their
And
station. Yeah. And thinking they're like in a position that they're not actually in,
well,
basically.
and creating drama with the other ladies too. So
Yes.
it's like it's a
Especially
whole
the other women
thing.
who are actually old ladies and, are like in a higher position than them in theory. They're just club girls. These women are old ladies and they're acting like it's the opposite, basically. And so Clutch gets back with a list of employees and they joke about him like screwing the woman for the info and he like laughs about it even though it's not true. And of course Gwen walks in right then. She wants to get the rest of the stuff from her car. And so he takes her out there and he's like, I didn't sleep with the girl like that, you don't need to clearly you're upset. Like that did not happen, whatever. And then he kisses her and she's sort of trying to fight it, but like she can't fight it. They're inevitable. So he gets her off right there in the garage, like right before some other people
Well,
come in.
and himself too, though. Like
Yeah.
he's
They,
anyway. That was
yes, they
that
both
was
have a good time, but it's very close with somebody walking in, and that would
yeah.
be big trouble for him because King was very clear about keeping her hands off.
And
And
also like
so
he is not somebody who wants to like he does not want her to be like, oh, free game, whatever, open
right,
for, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Like he
Well, and he
also
also doesn't wanna keep it a secret, like, King's his best friend, he's, like but until he knows for sure what is going on between them, like, they have to keep it under wraps. But it's very hot. And so one of the old ladies, Tessa, is in the kitchen the next day and makes Gwen a sandwich. And she's an older lady. She knew Gwen's mom, and so they talk a little bit about her. And then King comes in and gives her the keys to Dad's room and says it's been all cleaned up and that it was Clutch's idea that she move into their dad's room. And she's, like, pissed because she's like, "Oh, I see. So he gets what he wants from me, then he ignores me last night, and now today he wants me to move out of his room, like, fuck that guy," right?
yeah. Well, she's like,
Um,
I'm not a one and done kind of
right,
person.
like, and I don't appreciate being made to feel like that. But and of course she can't tell King any of this, so she's just, like, silently stewing. But King asks her about their twin bond and if she still felt it even, like, while they were apart, and she says she did, like, there was many times when she felt like something was going on with him or she was worried and, like, she couldn't figure out why, and he basically
Yeah.
did the same thing. Um, and so they're gonna try to figure all this stuff out about mom and if she did or didn't rat them out and why and what happened. And she's agreed to stay for that process, even though apparently now Clutch wants her gone, at least in her mind. But of course, we know that when he suggested that, it was the first night she got there, which is not what King made it sound like. So,
But
and
also like the way that like okay, so up until this point, we have found out that Clutch has managed his money well, has a house of his own.
mhm,
He does like stay, like he does have a room at the clubhouse, but that's not his house.
right,
And he like, and also like there's been times already where like he said he was gonna sleep on the couch when she was in his room. But when he was out there, he was like, ooh, there's all these people out here. And there's like, you know what I mean? Like there's,
Yeah.
and so like we do have an impression of him where like he's not really the way that he's painted. And also like there, like she is like, he didn't sleep in the room with me, like he didn't come to our room last night,
Right.
so obviously he was with someone else.
Right.
He has more like, so it's like there's more
That's not the only
options that she
option.
knows about.
Yeah.
And it's so it's interesting because the way the information is doled out, like I am 100% clear on why she thinks what she thinks,
Right.
but also
But also,
it's
you
like,
know that that's not what happened. Yep.
yeah.
And so that's the end of chapter 12. And next week we'll be back with more. But this book just really sucks you right in. Like you drop in right at the right moment.
Yeah, it's kind of a quick read, but also like don't be alarmed if you stay longer than you intended to. Just
Yeah, which
saying.
happened to me last night. I read way beyond what I had to. And yeah, I'm a little droopy this morning, but we're going. We're going for it. So we'll see you guys next week and we'll have the next section.
See you then.
Bye.